So let's talk just a moment about this idea of control and taking matters into our own hands. I'm growing more and more and more confident as I get older that I can just boldly and not worry about the arguments around it say that you live life one of two ways. You trust God or you're trying to be him. That there is no middle ground for you, right? Because the second you try to ooch over into middle ground, you've assumed the throne of God. So if you're the kind of person that says, I believe in Jesus, I believe in God, but I just don't believe everything, right? I don't think I have to submit fully. I think I'm smarter than God in some areas. What have you done except ascended the throne? So to say, I will take what I want and reject what I don't is to pretend that you are God. So that everyone in this room either trusts God or is trying to be God. So when we talk about control, and specifically control idols, we're talking about taking matters into our own hands. Now, if you have a control idol, here's what you want. You want self-discipline, you have standards, and you demand certainty. You've got to have certainty. Your greatest nightmare is uncertainty, and the people around you most often feel, right? They feel condemned by you, right? Because they can never be good enough for your standards. Right? You've got a control idol. You're going to control and manipulate and manage everything in your world. And so how can anybody ever feel anything but condemned by you? Your greatest nightmare is uncertainty. Now, when this happens, and let me mark your life, that uncertainty plays out in one of two ways. And I leaked this a little bit last week. People who struggle with control and power are going to really wrestle with anxiety or anger. They're going to wrestle with anxiety or anger. There's not another place for them to go with their control. And here's what I mean when I say anxiety or anger. You can't control. You just can't. You can't really control anything, but that will not stop you in your anxiety for trying all the more to control. So the more you feel like you can't control, the more you seek to control. The more you feel like you have no power, the more you try to flex your power. And when you do that and begin to realize that you are not God, you will grow more weary, you will grow more paralyzed with anxiety, or you will grow more angry. If you want to know what really is behind the veil in this part of the world, ask police officers in this area the calls that they respond to. You know the number one? Domestic. The number one issue that our cops are dealing with is men bullying and overpowering their wives because they're angry at what? Their lack of control and what appears to be a lack of power. And so they intimidate and they bully and they overpower and eventually they abuse. Why? Because we're all escalating sinners. Because what happens when they just won't do what you say is you've got to escalate. So how do you escalate? Well, nobody starts out hitting, right? You don't. You just escalate. Then you kind of use your size to intimidate because men are bigger, right? We just are. We're bigger and we're physically stronger biologically. That's not a slight on women. I would hope women that you wouldn't want to be, right? No. I want to be 6'5", 250. Okay. But biologically, that's not usually the case. And so this plays itself out over and over and over again, always in terms of escalation. I'm going to control, so I'm going to manipulate, I'm going to be conniving, I'm going to disorient you, I'm going to use my physical size, and then eventually in a heat of passion, there's a push, there's a hit, and then once you're there, then that becomes routine. See, it wasn't until last May that I started to go, oh, okay, I see here now. It's not comfort at all, it's control and it's power. And so that leads to all the kind of things that we see in this area. A lot of moms that are at home taking their kids Ritalin to survive. This is control, this is anxiety, this is fear, all birth in a desire to control and manage life. Look, I want to try to free you. Okay, so you're not God. You should probably take that weight off of yourself. You're not God. You should take that weight off yourself. You're not God. So you really can't control anything. And that, as terrifying as it might sound for you, is one of the greatest kind of news flashes in the history of mankind. You can just breathe. I can't control, I'm not God. I can't control, I'm not God. And I could keep going. I am limited in time and space, which means all I know right now is what I can see in this moment in history. This is it. This is all I got. You and me right here. Like right now, even at the other camp, no idea what's going on. I'm just right here with you. This is all I see. This is all I know. This moment right here. I have no idea what's going on in my house. Not quite sure where my kids are. I hope they're at home. They could be up here. I don't know. Right? I don't know what's going on in my office. I have no idea what's going on. I'm right here right now. This is all I know. But that's not like God. God's outside of time and space, everywhere at once, knowing all things and how all things play into all other things to create other things that finally form the tapestry of his glory and power that will be revealed on the canvas of the universe for eternity. And yet, even though I know those two things, I will oftentimes try to be God rather than trusting him. And from your pastor's heart, every time I find myself trying to be God, I can feel in me anxiety and anger growing. Fear and rage growing. So here's my question for you, just to consider as we close up our time together. I think the question of where are you trying to be God versus where are you trusting God is a question that would be good for us to ask one another all the time and good for us to ask ourselves all the time. It's not one of those questions that applies to you early in your faith and doesn't apply to you later on in your faith. There is a constant pull in us back towards wanting to be our own God and refusing to trust God. And there's all these justifications for why we wouldn't trust God. Right? I mean, will he really come through for me on this one? I mean, what if this doesn't happen? Well, how am I supposed to? Well, why would, right? There are all these justifications. So where is it in your life that you're trying to be God? Like, where are you most prone to shift into that mode of operating? And if you're like, man, I don't know, that's a real kind of ethereal, kind of up in the sky kind of question. Okay. What do you get most anxious about or most angry about? Can you answer that one? What do you get most anxious about and most angry about? I think if you can answer those two, that starts to give you some insight. And if you do something like this, and I want to talk specifically to the men, if you do something like, well, I get most angry when she doesn't. No. I have this conversation with my 10-year-old son. No one can make you do anything. You choose to do things. Like my son will get upset with one of my daughters and he'll be like, well, she, and I'm like, whoa, okay, I'm not saying, listen, I know her. Brother, I know her. I got no doubts that what you're saying is true, but your behavior is on you, not on her. Like she can't make you freak out and throw something across the room. You chose to do that. She can't make you do that. You did that because you got a little wicked heart. But here's the good news about wicked hearts, right? So be careful, brothers, and even sisters. I'm not saying that some of you ladies in here aren't the one that provokes and aren't the one, but the real game here is you worry about yourself. So brothers, if you're like, well, if she would just do what I say, I'm just wondering what text that is. Because I know this book really, really well. I just haven't found the one that says she has to do what you say. But I have found the one that says you better humble yourself and use your strength, energy, and vitality to lift her up and make sure she becomes a well-watered vine. I've read that one. I've read that you're to love her like Christ loved the church. You know how that story plays out? Christ dies on the cross to ransom her and save her. Self-sacrifice, gentleness, being wrung out for. That's what God has called you to. What makes you most anxious? What makes you most angry? Where is it that you're trying to be God? Where is it that you just can't seem to trust him? If you're in the wilderness right now, like it just feels dry and you're just like, gosh, I'm so disoriented, I don't know. Don't despise the desert. Don't despise it. the Lord's there. You haven't been abandoned. In fact, he does some of his most beautiful work in those spaces. You'll find out when you come out the other side, I promise. Where are you trying to be God rather than trusting him? Let's pray.